Conception to birth, we find out how science and technology are changing the way we reproduce.
Meet Amy Appleton. She's just taken a controversial new test to help her decide when to start a family.
And the future of screening. How much will we know about our babies before they're even born? And for all you lads out there, I'll be bringing you the latest on male fertility. So watch this space.
But first, is there a right time to have a child? These days, more and more couples are delaying that big decision, only to find themselves up against the biological clock.
Well, now there's a controversial new test available, which many women will be expecting to answer the question, how long should you leave it?
Most of us procrastinate over parenthood, but whilst men think they can be pretty relaxed about waiting for Miss, the biological clock is ticking. The later you leave it, the more difficult it is to conceive. You probably don't know this, but there's actually a test available for women which claims to tell the time on your biological clock, so you can start a family before it's too late. At the moment, it's only experimental and available privately to the patients of one doctor here in London. Consultant Paul Sahal treats women for infertility. He's now adapted the same technology to predict the decline in a woman's egg supply.
Throughout a woman's life, there is a steady decline in the number of eggs in the ovary, and that decline gets faster after 30, and after 35 there's a very rapid decline in the number of eggs and in the quality of the egg as well.
Sahal's theory is that this decline can be measured by a combination of two blood tests which have been used for years to screen women having fertility treatment. He calls it the G test.
Please come in and make yourself comfortable.
Thank you very much. So, how do I go about taking this test?
Well, on day 2 of your period, you should come to the clinic to have a blood sample taken and have an ultrasound scan as well. And then you start a nasal spray. So you have one sniff into each nostril 4 times a day. Then you keep on taking the spray and come back again to the clinic on day 3 of your period and again on day 4. And that's about it. So you essentially have to come for 3 visits, have 3 blood samples.
The spray is a synthetic version of a natural female hormone which stimulates a woman's ovaries to produce estrogen. Sahal's theory is the more estrogen a woman produces, the more eggs she has left, and therefore she has longer before becoming infertile. It's a controversial claim. The G-test comes at the less than knockdown price of £250. The results fall into 3 categories, which its makers like to compare to a set of traffic lights. If you get the green light, it means your egg supply is still high. Amber means it's running low, and if you want to have children, you'd better hurry up. If you get red, it means it's already too late. One woman who recently took the G-test is Amy Appleton. She had a particular reason to be worried.
I suspected that I was going to menopause or could menopause early because my mother menopaused early, her mother did, and her mother's sisters did. My mother's sisters didn't, however, so there was a sort of 50-50 chance. But we decided that I should try and find out.
Amy is only 27, but with her family history, her consultants believe she would menopause within 18 months. She decided to make an appointment to see Paul Sahal.
The G-test confirmed that I had a low reserve of eggs, that I had already started to menopause. It was suddenly all happening now, so it was quite devastating.
How did this knowledge change your life?
We decided to go ahead and try and get pregnant as quickly as possible. And now I am pregnant. I'm 4.5 months pregnant and very happy.
Well, that's one satisfied customer. But does this mean that all women in their 20s and 30s should be queuing up for the test? Paul Sahal certainly thinks so, and he's even working on a home test kit which could be available over the counter. But don't get too excited. There's a catch. Can it tell me how long I've got before I can't have children anymore?
We can't give you this kind of precise information, or what we can tell you that your test is normal now. It will probably give you confidence, of course, for the next year or 2. But if you really want to be unequivocal as to the future prospective potential of getting pregnant, then you must repeat probably every 2 years.
So Paul Sahal believes that through regular testing, women will be able to anticipate the menopause. But other doctors are still waiting to be convinced.
What will happen is that large numbers of women will have the test and will get the amber light as you describe it. They will then go to their doctors and ask for interpretation of this amber light. And we will not have the data to explain to them what this means. We will have no idea whether this means that their fertility is about to run out tomorrow, next month, next year, or in 5 years.
So is this test really worth taking? Well, the answer is yes if you're on fertility treatment like IVF or you're worried about the premature menopause. But for the majority of women, the advice from doctors we spoke to is hang on to your 250 quid until they know more about what the test really means.
Good advice. Now, lads, what's our role in all this? If you think child, you can think again. Men, too, may have a biological clock. Some middle-aged men who father children by IVF have produced kids with genetic defects. And time may be running out for you young lads, too. Everything from the water you drink to food additives may cause your sperm count to go backwards. So here's some advice to keep your sperm numbers high. Sperm like it cool, so it's goodbye tight trousers, hello boxer shorts. Keep out of saunas and hot baths. And smoking is out. It hits your sperm numbers and makes them less macho. Lastly, don't sit around watching the box. You might cramp their style.
Now, modern parents-to-be have some difficult decisions to make. One of them is whether to test a fetus for genetic conditions. Trouble is, the only conclusive test available can lead to miscarriage. But now doctors are developing an alternative which promises to be risk-free.
Testing a pregnancy for a genetic condition, usually Down syndrome, is free, it's voluntary, and the results are 100% accurate. That's the good news. The bad news is they have to use this. There's no way around it. Reliable genetic testing means taking a sample of cells from inside the womb. The most common way to do it is through amniocentesis, which means pushing a hollow 4-inch needle straight through the mother's abdomen into the fluid surrounding the baby.
Okay, now we'll just find a nice pool of fluid well away from the baby.
It's uncomfortable for the mother and risky for the baby. The sample is mostly the baby's urine, but the needle also draws up a few stray cells from the fetus that float in the fluid.
Nearly finished. Are you okay, Charlotte?
Yeah.
Well done.
It's this handful of fetal cells that go off for the definitive Downs test. From here, it's a long 3-week wait for the result. But whatever the outcome, there's still a small risk that the test itself could permanently damage the fetus. As every couple who comes here for an amnio knows, around 1 in 200 will result in a miscarriage. John Byrne has to advise couples on the risks of amniocentesis and knows just how strong the demand for screening is.
Most mothers ask us for prenatal diagnostic tests for Down syndrome, for example, if they're available. And they do that despite the knowledge that there is a chance of losing the pregnancy. So it's a difficult decision for any family to make.
In the end, it's a calculated risk, but there is a way of getting hold of fetal cells without disturbing the womb and endangering the pregnancy, and that's through the mother's bloodstream.
For many years we've known there was another way, a holy grail if you like, which is that a few of the cells from the fetal circulation can cross the placenta and get into the mother's circulation.
Until it's born, the fetus draws all its nutrition from the mother's blood supply through the placenta. From the very earliest stages of pregnancy, stray fetal cells leak across the placenta and into the mother's blood. There they can survive for decades. So, in theory, a simple blood test should be able to provide all the information doctors need. The trouble is, the trickle of fetal cells is so tiny that the odds of finding one in a mother's blood sample is just 1 in 100 billion. But in Newcastle, scientists think they may have the solution, using a computer to do the donkey work. What have we got here?
Well, we've got a scanning machine, and under it is a slide. And on the slide is an enriched sample of the mother's blood. The sample contains about 10 million blood cells.
of which between 5 and 20 are of fetal origin.
The computer checks a staggering 5,000 blood cells a second. When it spots a fetal one, it takes a photo. In this case, from a whole tube of mother's blood, it's found just 7 cells are from the baby. It would take a technician days to do what this computer can do in just half an hour. So what news do you have then for this mother's sample?
Well, if we look at the fluorescent images here, and here's a nice bright cell, we see a red spot, which is the X chromosome that we've all got. There's a green spot, which is the Y chromosome, which says that this is a baby boy. It's the male chromosome. And there are 2 spots attached to chromosomes 21, which says this is a normal fetus in the sense that it's not a Down syndrome fetus. If it had 3 spots attached to around 3 chromosomes 21, and it would have been Down syndrome fetus.
Clear. And the anxious parents only had to wait 24 hours instead of 3 weeks to find out.
If this works, it is a very exciting and significant development. The first time we can see the prospect of developing a diagnostic test without risking miscarriage, first for Down syndrome, but later perhaps for the many other rarer genetic problems that we see in our clinics.
Although this technology won't be widely available for at least 2 years, it looks set to make screening a risk-free while you wait service. And whether we want to know it or not, it's only a matter of time before a simple blood test will be able to tell us even more about the human fetus. Anything from eye colour to life expectancy.
Still to come on this special Tomorrow's World, meet the young mother who nearly lost her first 2 children, and a new treatment to save her 3rd pregnancy.
And military technology on the labour ward, how this device could give doctors a window into a baby's brain. Right, we've all heard of computer dating, but in America they've even started computer mating. Looking for the ideal father and just can't get the right man? If you're happy to bypass strict British laws on finding donors, you can look on the internet. Just surf the brochures of American sperm banks to find your ideal man. Every taste is catered for. The tall, the athletic, the successful, and the highly educated. Get a license, use a credit card, and the sperm will arrive in the post. But is this the way to get the perfect child? Some researchers now think it's mum who provides the brains, whereas dad supplies the emotions. So lads, if you want brainy kids, find a librarian. Now, all parents are given a due date for their babies, but they hardly ever arrive on time, born in the back of a cab. But now scientists have developed a new way of predicting a baby's arrival, which they say will ensure you're not down at the football when the big day arrives. I just put £10 on my friend's wife giving birth on December the 7th. He tells me it's a safe bet. Of course, I don't really trust him, so I put a £5 on the 3:30 at Newbury as well. The point is, our methods of birth prediction are outdated and fairly inaccurate. For more than 150 years, expectant mothers have been using Nagel's rule to predict their baby's birth date. It says the length of the human gestation period is 10 menstrual cycles, which is on average 9 months and 1 week to the day baby is born. But Nagel's only accurate 9 out of 100 times, and the actual delivery date varies according to your race, age, height, weight, and diet. Meet the Mittendorf-Williams rule. Its designers claim it's twice as accurate as the Nagel method. It's a computer program that uses 16 multiple-choice questions to predict the birth date. They range from age and weight to whether you have a college education or not. Intrigued? I thought you might be. Ladies and gents, get ready to test it. The American researchers have studied the lifestyles of hundreds of pregnant
The
women
pre-pregnancy weight in pounds.
and reckon they found the top 16 factors which affect the length of pregnancy.
Current maternal age in years.
Some of them come as a bit of a surprise to our guinea pigs,
I can't understand why they need to know that, but
and some of them don't.
Alcohol consumed since conception an awful lot.
Once they've all confessed, the computer names the day.
none.
There's a few surprises. What's it say?
19.
19th of October, right? Damn.
2 days late. What do you think about it?
I'd rather have it now, thanks.
A few disappointments.
Newcastle Kennedy.
2nd of October.
And a few straight out of left field. Madam, congratulations, you gave birth yesterday. Well, the tests have been done, the time's predicted. Now all we can do is wait. So far, only 3 of those mothers have had their babies, but the good news is it's 2 to the computer, 1 to Nagel. Anya.
Now, it's something that no parent wants to think about. But every year in Britain, 35,000 babies are born prematurely. And for the parents of these tiny sick babies, it's a harrowing time. Many of them don't survive, and some bear the scars for the rest of their lives. But now a new treatment is being tested, which may offer hope in the battle against premature birth. Lisa Cowley is all too familiar with the heartache of preterm birth. Both her daughters were born early. The youngest, Georgia, spent 2.5 months in an incubator.
She literally fought for her life every single day. I mean, instantly she was put on morphine. It was like looking at a dead baby because she was lifeless. I mean, it really, really was horrific. We all want perfect children, I know, but it just becomes secondary. I desperately wanted her to live, and I'd already got such a bond with her. I just wanted her to get over each battle that was in front of her, you know, each problem. And she sort of seemed to, but it just took such a long time, 2.5 months.
Lisa's now pregnant again for the 3rd time, and she's come here to Queen Charlotte's Hospital in London for her antenatal treatment.
Here we can see the baby moving about. That's the baby's head. And
Given her medical history, it's very likely that Lisa will go into labour early again, so doctors are going to have to keep a pretty close eye on her. There are drugs which can stop preterm labour. They act against hormones called prostaglandins, which trigger labour. But as Phil Bennett, the consultant looking after Lisa, knows, stopping the production of prostaglandins is dangerous because the fetus needs them to survive.
in the fetus, prostaglandins are important for quite a lot of body functions, kidney function, and for preventing blood from flowing around the lungs before the baby is born. The baby doesn't need blood to go around its lungs until it takes its first breath after birth. If blood goes around the lungs before the baby is born, then when the baby is born, it can cause difficulty with breathing, and those babies don't do so well.
But recently there's been an exciting new development because scientists have found there are actually two types of prostaglandin.
One sort is produced in the body all of the time, where prostaglandins are important for ongoing functions. And the other sort are only produced, if you like, as an emergency response.
Professor Bennett's team discovered it was these emergency prostaglandins that are responsible for labour. So what's needed is a selective drug that works on those alone, stopping the uterus from contracting, but leaving the other prostaglandins to do their essential work in the fetus. And last year, Professor Bennett found just such a drug. This is it, nimesulide. And this experiment shows the drugs at work. In here are tiny strips of womb muscle. Every 10 minutes or so they contract, but the movement is so small you can hardly see them with the naked eye. However, on this computer screen, you can see the peaks where the contractions are, but as soon as the drug's added, the contractions stop.
We know that nimesulide works in the laboratory, and our current studies show that it has less side effects than some of the more commonly used drugs. In order to prove that it really works in preterm labour, we would need a very large study with a lot of patients enrolled. But I have a few patients who are at such high risk of preterm delivery that I think that the possible risk of the drug are outweighed by the risks to their babies.
One of those patients is Mrs. Al-Shakir, who went into labour 4 months early. She was going to lose her baby when Professor Bennett gave her the drug to stop labour.
He knows I had a hard time, so...
We had quite a lot of anxiety. You weren't sure whether you wanted to take what was really an experimental drug, and I think I understand that.
That was 4 months ago, and Mrs. Al-Shakir has just given birth to baby Bijan, a healthy, full-term 8 pounds, thanks to Dr. Bennett.
He gave me this beautiful... I don't believe it. It's wonderful, wonderful. I don't want to close my eyes.
Professor Bennett has already treated 10 women with Limizolide. So far, the results have been positive. But not only can the drug be used on women already in preterm labour, it can be used to prevent women going into labour in the first. And that's why Lisa's here. She's just 16 weeks pregnant now, and so far all is well. But as you may remember, her first 2 babies were premature. So as the pregnancy goes on, there's an ever-increasing risk of her going into labour dangerously early. Professor Bennett has decided to give her the new drug to prevent this happening.
We'll probably treat her with Limizolide from about 26 to 28 weeks in order to get her through that very important and critical 26 to 32 week period.
So what are your hopes for this drug?
Well, hopefully, if it just gives me a few more weeks, it just buys me some time. That's everything. I feel incredibly lucky that I've got 2 daughters. You know, it could have been just as likely that I'd have none. But I feel this time round, at least I know that I have problems, and I really do feel quite positive I'm in the very best hands.
Now, new monitoring technology which could help prevent unnecessary caesareans. My daughter Maya here was breech, so I chose to have a caesarean. But more and more women are having emergency caesareans when they had hoped for a natural childbirth. The thing is, labour is an unpredictable time and no one wants anything to go wrong. In some ways, babies are much tougher than they look. They're built to withstand the enormous physical forces which are at work during childbirth. But there are times when they can be in danger, when not enough oxygen is reaching the brain. Dr. John Wyatt is a neonatal paediatrician at University College Hospital in London. He knows how uncertain those final moments can be.
While the baby's being born, they're like a little diver with the afterbirth, the placenta, passing oxygen through the cord to the baby. And although the majority of babies are born, I mean the vast majority, without any kind of problem, a small proportion of babies do run into difficulty because of shortage of oxygen.
And if the brain is starved of oxygen for too long, there can be brain damage, so the baby's progress needs to be followed.
One of the techniques that involves taking blood from the baby's head, using a sharp blade. It's a very unpleasant and uncomfortable procedure for the mother.
Doctors have to play it safe. If there are any signs of trouble, an emergency caesarean is often performed, which is what happened to Gilly and Dominic Pride.
She was monitored all the way through labour, and they said that we could keep going, but I wasn't dilating. I got to 7 centimetres, and they decided then that it was time to deliver her because her heartbeat was a little bit low.
Did you feel cheated or disappointed at all that you weren't able to deliver naturally?
Yes, I mean, I'd planned on having a nice natural labour and birth. That's what I hoped for.
So you put the hat on.
Not only can an emergency caesarean leave parents feeling cheated out of a natural birth, it also takes a physical toll, and several weeks are needed to recover from what is essentially major surgery.
Thank you very much.
But Dr. Wyatt and his team have developed a new monitoring technique that's easier on mother and baby and provides a window to the brain.
With new technology, there's a way of monitoring the baby's condition using invisible infrared light with this probe here. And this probe sits gently on the baby's head and allows us to measure continuously the oxygen level within the baby's brain.
The probe fits to the baby's head using suction and can be placed there while the baby is still in the womb. It shines infrared light into the baby's head, and the amount of light absorbed is measured. The trick is that different colour blood absorbs varying amounts of light. So the device can tell the crucial difference between blood containing oxygen, which is red, and deoxygenated blood, which is blue.
What we hope is that if we have a more consistent way of picking out which is the rare baby that's really in trouble, we'll be able to detect that baby and perform a caesarean section. But also we'll be able to prevent the unnecessary caesarean sections that are being performed many times in babies, because doctors really have to use educated guesswork.
Early results suggest the scan's a reliable and accurate indicator of a baby's well-being. But before it's used routinely on labour wards, much more work needs to be done. But because more and more parents hope for a natural birth, there's a certain amount of reluctance to take part in these research trials, as midwife Sally Lawrence has found out.
They want to know whether it will be comfortable for them and whether it will restrict. We say no, it doesn't. None of the women that we've ever studied have found it so uncomfortable that we've had to remove the monitor during labour.
Understandably, a lot of women want to have a childbirth which is as free of technology as possible. But we think that by using this kind of limited technology, we may be able to avoid something that's much more invasive.
So in future, we may see a reduction in the 140,000 caesareans performed every year in this country.
Before we go, we've just time for one more of tomorrow's babies. But so far, this one's just a twinkle in his father's eye. Forget man, woman, or dog in space. We bring you news of sperm in space. Earlier this year, scientists blasted a caseload of the stuff into orbit aboard the space shuttle Atlantis. In fact, it was sea urchin sperm, which behaves just like human sperm. But why do it? Well, to see how it acts, of course. They already knew that sperm move a lot faster in space, but now they also think that in zero gravity, sperm can't swim for as long. This could be bad news for wannabe space parents, as the sperm are less likely to be up to the job when they finally reach the egg. Well, that's it for tonight.
Hope you enjoyed our glimpse of tomorrow's babies.
Next week, Peter and Philippa are back in the studio with a remarkable story about extracting DNA from fingerprints.
And I'll be investigating boxing safety. So until then,
good night.
Good night.
A crime-fighting policy that has reduced offences in one area by 25%. Martin